Tonight, mindful of what's happening in the sub-region and recent commentary in the country, I have assembled men from our history for a conversation on how to promote peace, stability, and the development of our mother Ghana. You're welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Akwa. Now, join me now via Zoom is Sergeant Daniel Aloga Akatapore. He joined us from his base in the United Kingdom. He'll also be joined on the same mode by CDD fellow Professor Kweku Asare. In studio with me is a former PNDC secretary and also for specifically youth and sports, right? Zayebo joins me for a conversation that very soon you know the rest of the people that will be part of this bigger conversation on Ghana's peace, development, and stability. Now, there's something that I need to start with because, and you're welcome very especially, Zaya.
Thank you.
Yes, this is our second or third time this year. We'll be talking about football and all the other things previously. Now, proud to commence this conversation where we put out a flyer about whether or not the indications on the ground indeed signal anything at all. There were some who were of the belief that people like you have been assembled to cause commotion in this country. I mean, how did you feel hearing things like that?
I think it stems from ignorance, largely, because people like me don't cause commotion. Mm-hmm. What we have rather promoted ever since our involvement in 1982 has been peace and development. And I think that's what we will promote.
Well, now, according to the National Reconciliation Commission, there were significantly higher, and you should know these things, violations and abuses which were registered during the periods of unconstitutional governments than during the constitutional ones. In fact, the records of the National Reconciliation Commission say that the entrance of unconstitutional governments have always led to sharp rises in violations, which peaks at the beginning of the rule of these governments. Similarly, things like abductions and detentions are higher during these times where there's an illegal overthrow of a constitutional government, which we compare to governments that are being elected. Let me start on Zoom with you, Sergeant Akatapore. Do you cringe when you hear the remotest reference to an unconstitutional overthrow of government in recent times? Of course, I mean, you may have to unmute for me. Yes, sir. Yes. I was actually coming to you, Mr. Akatapore, briefly on this one. Yes, the question I'm asking is really about whether you cringe when you hear people make reference directly or indirectly to unconstitutional overthrow of governments, and if you are in a position to speak to it.
Yes, I think that it's a sad state if people are advocating for military overthrows of governments, because we've done it all and we'll always go back to the same state. So it's pointless.
The conversation, I mean, mostly, perhaps the biggest conversation today is premised on the conditions that we find ourselves and the things that happen briefly. Now, I want you to take us a little bit backwards. Your time, what were the things that people talked about that precipitated actions of illegal removal of governments, be it military or not?
Since coup started in Ghana, there have always been 2 or 3 reasons that have been given for the overthrow of government. It's always about poor economy, corruption, and nepotism, friends of governments of friends and family members. So those are basically the 3 reasons that are always given. So if you want to look at the coup space, the coup planning space, you've got the vulnerabilities, and the vulnerabilities include the things that I've spoken about. You see, so I've got some notes here which I wrote down as part of this discussion. And then the fact that you've got a free press is also a vulnerability. You see, so when you look at all the vulnerabilities, then you have to look at the threats, the threat actors, the people who can take advantage of those actors. And all these actors are still there. The only actor, the only actor that we've been able to handle well since Rawlings's time has been the external state actors, like external governments trying to interfere in our internal affairs. Why? Because we've been able to agree to do exactly what those state actors want. So they have no reason to want to help to overthrow any government anymore since Rawlings's time. So Rawlings found that formula, and that's why there hasn't been any coup from sponsored from outside. But you know, internally you've still got the army, you've got internal militants. Like June 19th, it wasn't the army, it was militants that acted, including 31st December. It wasn't the army that staged the coup. These were militants who overthrew the government and took over the army. And the army then basically lined behind the government. You see, then you've got movement of people. You know, like it happened in Philippines in 1986. So all these conditions are there. So as for the conditions for a coup, they've always been there. They've always been the same. The point is, are the people in a position to do it? Are they willing? Do they have the capability at any time to do it? And that is the question.
Now, there's a question, though, beyond all of these, because you have lived through the periods. You have been part of the process. Do they yield the results that people say when they ask for, let's say, an unconstitutional removal of a government, the results that they want? Do these unconstitutional removals ever yield the results that they want?
No. You see, when you are plotting a coup, yeah, it's a conspiracy. So what it means is that you never really get to know what everybody thinks. Yeah, the key players. Because, look, I met Rawlings several times during the planning process. And there was no meeting at which we spent more than an hour. The maximum we ever spent, maybe an hour at each point. So you find it difficult to get to know the person very well. You kind of assume that you know the person. So he had other people coming into the coup that we didn't know. I had friends all over the Ghana Armed Forces throughout the country, my mates and boy company, comradeship and things like that, who were coming into the coup. Rawlings didn't know. He didn't have a clue. The same way he had friends, foreigners and so on, all involved, and we didn't know. And within a week or two of the takeover, some people came and took over the secretariat, particularly his family members and his cousins. So when that happens, all the plans that you had before the coup are thrown out of the window for something else. So the coup can never achieve its aim because it's a conspiracy. And in a conspiracy, you don't sit down to ask so many questions to understand, because you end up either being arrested at the place that you are having the discussion, or somebody suspects that you want more information to go and report. So a coup, I don't see how a coup can ever be successful in achieving its aims. It won't happen.
Let me come in studio because Zah is here. The sentiment is saying that coups are never successful in achieving their aims. Is that a similar sentiment you come to this with? Because you are part of the PNDC.
Yes, I think I agree largely with what Akatapore has just said. I mean, we've seen coups since the 1966, and some of us have lived through these coups. One thing has become very clear, that they never really achieve any of their objectives, because they don't really have any clear objectives.
Okay.
Different coups have different objectives.
Okay.
And usually, like Akataporo said, there are too many, these are conspiracies. Mm-hmm. Different people coming with different opinions. So you imagine that, oh, we agree on everything. You never really agree on anything. And I can tell you, since 1966, none of the military regimes has really achieved much. And I think that if you eliminate the Achampon regime, which tried in its early days, and even the PNDC, the first year of the PNDC, the rest have been disasters compared to their civilian counterparts.
I see. But why then do you think anybody would make reference to it? Anybody would think that it's a fanciful idea to entertain in the first place?
I think a lot of, times have changed. We are talking of a generational change. There are some people who get excited, they hear Jerry Rawlings, they think he did so much in a short time. No, he did nothing. Two, that excites them.
He did nothing. I mean, well, a lot changed during the period.
Well, yeah, maybe there was. I haven't seen it, but maybe there was. But what I'm saying is that there are some young people who are really excited about that era. And they ought to be told that things were not so rosy, right? And therefore they get excited. I mean, when I was a young man, I really got excited about some of these things. So with hindsight, I would say no. If you ask me again, I don't think that it's something that is
because you were part of the PNDC. When there was clamor for the PNDC to come in, exactly what were you hoping that after 81 would happen?
Well, we had this fanciful notion that what was happening was going to be a revolution in the country. We were going to have a movement of workers, peasants, farmers, youth groups, and so on and so forth, which happened in the first 6 to 7 months of the coup. But that is about power. Eventually, we came to the question of where these groups stood vis-a-vis the military regime, the Rawlings regime, basically. And it was obvious that Rawlings wanted simply to rule. He was not interested in transformation. And we were interested in transformation. So you realize that no, at what point did we actually agree with Rawlings that there will be transformation? There was none, like he said. So we're just a bunch of young people hoping that things will change. They never changed. And I'm saying that to the young people of this country, these coups, they don't really achieve what they are intended to achieve because of these factors.
Now, there's a point, though, that needs to be made about, because there is a recent conversation that's springing forth. The growth rate in 1966 was negative 4%. In 1972, the growth rate was also 2.5%, negative actually. In fact, in 79 and 81, all of these periods where we had a change of some leadership of a sort through the barrel of the gun or through an unconstitutional means, we clearly had growth rates in the negative. How justified is the claim that the economy provides fodder for people who think that things will be better off under military governments? The difference, however, is that in the first 3 quarters of last year alone, we had a positive 5% all cumulatively together. So we do not have the trend of the negatives that's been happening within the period. In any case, even during COVID, to be fair, we had a 0.4%, and still we didn't get into the negatives like other states did. Is the claim of economic crisis justification real in any case? Did it happen in your time too?
Well, like you said, it's a claim.
Yeah.
It happened. Under the Liman regime, Liman government, one of the things we usually complain about was the state of the economy. And yet when the PNDC came to power, the first year, basically we didn't even touch the economy.
Oh, I see.
We didn't touch the economy. Anytime you mention the issue of the economy, Rawlings and Kojo Chikata will say, oh no, leave the economy alone to us. But they never did anything. That's why there was so much hardship in 1983. They didn't touch the economy because they are so much interested in consolidating political power. So we spend a lot more time arguing among ourselves, fighting for control of certain sectors of the economy and society and so on. So basically, I think the military regimes are the worst periods for economic transformation because they are not prepared for the economy. And that's also because under military regimes, most foreign governments which are willing to give aid to the country are reluctant or suspicious of where you are going. Because of political stability issues. And therefore, for almost the first 2 years, you achieve nothing. I think the NLC had the same problems.
Let me find out if the other people I have on. First, let me go to Professor Koko Asare, who's a CDD fellow who joins us on now. Prof, the question, though, is that, I mean, the economy is always an issue to raise when you are interested in moves of this kind, regardless of how unwarranted it may be. Do you think that the stakes have changed so much and so well that the economy is no longer a matter to be considered by anybody to make any move like that? I keep hearing Zaya and Co say it will not work because military governments don't fix economies. Is this a Ghanaian phenomenon?
Thanks, Raymond. Let's be clear about what you are asking. You are asking whether Ghana is at a risk of an illegality.
Yeah.
Because coups are illegal. And we are enjoined to actually resist them. Raymond, after 30 years of operating a constitution, we must reset our minds and remove coups from our opportunity set. We have peaceful, institutionalized norms to resolve our disputes. We have regular elections. We know how to hold governments accountable. The army itself have lost any appetite for staging a coup, because most people don't realize that the institution that probably suffered the most damage from all these years of coup was the army itself. Generals being executed, total breakdown of discipline in the barracks. Coups are terrible things. They are something that we should not entertain under any circumstances. Economic hardships. Even in the United States, there are people experiencing economic hardship. So merely because you cite economic hardship, do not give you any justification to talk about a coup.
I see.
There are ways to address those hardships. Now, people really need to understand our history of coups. And I mean, I see Alonga there. He probably doesn't remember me. But a day before they staged the coup, we were having an ISEC meeting. And if you remember, he was around, and then we didn't see him again. We heard he was involved in this type of thing. But we've had 5 coups: 1966, 72, 78, 79, 1981. 3 against civilian regimes, 2 against military regimes. And then we've had several unsuccessful coups. Operation Guitar Boy in 1967, One Man, One Machete in 1975, the Jiwa Uprising in 1983. The effect of all of these coups cumulatively is, whether it was termed a liberation, a redemption, a revolution, defense, they wrought nothing but uncommon misery, economic hardships, abuse of rights, moral decadence, and total indiscipline in the society. So we need to stop this entertainment of coups as an option. Look, the reality is we have challenges. And I continue to expose, condemn, criticize. But when we expose these problems and condemn these problems, it's not some invitation for coup makers to say people are unsatisfied or unhappy, so let's go take over. No, that is never the case. We need to be celebrating 3 decades of constitutional regime. That is an achievement. The average lifespan of a constitution globally is about 7 years. So Ghana now stands with the more advanced societies in terms of the endurance of living under a constitutional regime. And it really must stop. These fantasies about coups must stop.
Is it out of ignorance? Because you get the impression from people, perhaps way younger than the age of those who were there and saw these coup d'etats right from the 60s up to the 70s into the 80s. You get the impression that virtually once in a while, the idea pops up. And it's predominantly amongst those who did not live through the period. Is it pure ignorance, or we could just say they do not understand what happened at the time?
They do not understand the history. And that is one reason why maybe this program that you are doing is good, because it allows some of us who have lived under military governments to come and to remind them that, look, it was complete hell to live under those military regimes, and that they should not have a nostalgia for that, because it was not a good thing, and that there are viable ways of changing governments if they don't want. They could offer themselves for political positions if they want. I don't understand. The coup thing should just go away, and maybe we are not teaching the younger people well enough about the potential problems that we are likely to encounter when we entertain this coup.
Now, I need to move on to Aloga because, there is a question, though, about when we have difficulties like we find ourselves in. Admittedly, government officials have also admitted that we are currently in the difficulties we find ourselves in. How can we make sure that there is no reference in any form to the possibility of having to change government through the barrel of the gun, even when we have difficulties?
Well, like the professor said, we need a lot of education for people to understand that at the end of the day, the whole world economy is structured in such a way that when you are at the receiving end of it, like most developing countries are, it's difficult to escape the hardship, because the world economic order, the neoliberal economic system is such that we play a role, we play a role. We have to be there to be exploited. That is the way it is. And it is very difficult to escape from that position. So it's going to be difficult for any government. Even if Kwame Nkrumah were to be alive today, he will have the same problems. Because what was possible in 1981, for example, what was possible in 1966, it's not possible today. Look at even a big country like Russia. It's big, the international institutions are being used against, even Russia. So if you're a small country like, for example, Mali or Ghana or Guinea, and then you stage your coup and they bring all these institutions to bear on you, you have no chance of escaping it. You are going to collapse, which is why the whole world does not like a coup d'etat. So if you stage a coup, it means that you are just bringing hardship onto the country and your people. And at the personal level, it's just going to be misery. Look at the end of Rawlings. His own, the people that he helped most were calling him a barking dog. Books were written against him by the people who benefited most from his endeavors. So it's a pointless exercise. That is what I'm saying. It's very pointless.
Now, I'll be coming back to you. What I'll be interested in is, to you, what's the way forward in our current situation? Because, of course, you might not be in the country, but you may understand the Ghanaian problem from how it's been dealt with in times past. What is the way forward in dealing with the current difficulties that we have? There's a question that I'm coming to you on here in the studio. When you sit back, because you have been there, you have supported some of these and it's not ended the way you thought it should have ended, or probably not worked out the way you thought it should have been. To you, what are the biggest problems you ought to deal with if we do not want to hear these things coming up consistently and we want to have a smooth ride into development, stability, and also have a fourth Republican, which is almost like continued in perpetuity?
Yeah, I think that we need to be honest that some of the political parties in this country are not helping. Basically, some of them somehow believe that a coup d'etat will endure to their benefit. It will not. I think some of them do.
But political parties are suspended during coup d'etats.
Yes. It doesn't matter. They still support coup d'etats. Most of the, especially the young elements in these parties. What I think ought to be done is simply this, that the period of the Rawlings regime basically led to the collapse of the mass movements in Ghana. All the radical movements have basically collapsed. Okay. So there's no avenue for any independent thinking. So you find out that most demonstrations are led by political parties, and usually the two big ones, right? Is there a way that we can revive the mass movement? The National Union of Ghana Students was the most popular
but looks
student union.
Today, the student leadership is still
there. But they are not as, as radical as they used to be, right? We need a TUC, which is still there, to be very active, but to talk more about development and not to take sides in these partisan debates. We need to mobilize our farmers again. We need to mobilize our market women again. We need to go into this area. The Ministry of Information used to go to these areas to engage citizens on what ought to be done on budgets, on health, on social welfare issues. We need to revive these institutions because they are dead. So while you have political parties basically trying to sell their stalls and to sell us their goods, and that is what is creating the problem. If these organizations, they are independent of political parties, but they are Ghanaian, and those are the ones we need to revive. And I think we ought to find ways of getting them back to where they used to be. And I believe, for instance, that even organizations, either on the left or on the right or in the center, ought to be revived so that these ones can join the debate. Debates should not be limited to the two political parties. And that's when this cool thing comes in, because there are some people whom I believe think that whatever be the case, they have to be in, Jubilee House or Flagstaff House. That should not be the case. The argument should be, how do we build this country? How do we bring the market women on board? How do we bring students on board? How do we bring the youth on board? And that is what we need to revive.
There's a question I need to ask you personally. Do you think Ghana is heading in the right direction?
I think so.
You think so?
I think Ghana is heading in the right direction. Like Akataparo said, the world situation has changed. Globally, every country is going through a certain form of crisis.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything else that anyone can do about the current crisis. I believe that.
The 79, 80, 81, the kind of crisis we had back then, is it comparable to what's happening now?
No. I think those were very severe crisis points, very severe, especially 79.
Okay.
Very severe. Shortage of goods, shortage of food, and so on and so forth. The world economy today is different from that time.
Okay.
And I believe that this government, regardless of some of the shortcomings that they have faced, has done enough. And I don't think that anyone coming on the back of, a coup is going to do any better. This government has done enough. They could do better in several things. And I think that they could be a bit more cautious in some of the things that they do. But I think they got, so far, they've done what they can do. That is their philosophy, and that's what they're doing. I don't think anyone can do any better.
That's the same question maybe I should be asking you, Sergeant Akatapori. The question is about which areas can we improve, develop, so that we get rid of the entire references at all 100%. What can we do differently? Which structural changes can we make to the development and the structures of this country so we head in the right direction consistently?
Okay, you see, the Professor Asare mentioned the fact that we have elections every 4 years, and therefore we have mechanisms for changing governments and so on. So if before the 4 years people are complaining and wanting a coup d'etat, basically what they are saying is that the 4 years is too long. That's the way I look at it. So why don't we shorten it? So for example, if after a government is elected, at the point of 18 months, there should be a referendum as to whether the government should continue or not. If the answer is no, then there should be elections at the end of the second year, and that president resigns immediately. And then his party has to choose a new person to contest the elections. I don't know whether I've explained myself well.
I get you.
Basically, that's how I see it.
You are looking for some form of a midterm election based on a referendum?
Yeah, so 18 months, there should be a referendum. Yes or no, should the government continue? By at the end of the 18 months, all the promises that were made, we will see whether it is possible to achieve or not. But not to guarantee the 4 years.
But feasibly, how would this work? In 18 months, a government may just be settling after just a year in office. How is a government supposed to be assessed in 18 months? I'm just asking that question as a follow-up.
Yeah, it's a fair question. The point is, if you spend about 4 years in opposition, and you study the problem, and you make a lot of promises in your manifesto, within 18 months, we should see signs. At the minimum, we should see signs to at least to indicate that you are moving towards achieving those aims.
So that'll be an interesting structural change you propose. Let me bounce it up to the other people. Whether it's something that's worth considering.
One of the arguments that we have against this is that elections are expensive. But democracy is expensive. After all, we spend money doing other things. So why don't we spend it in a place that will make everybody happy and put the governments on their toes? Because if you come into power, I know that in 18 months you are facing a referendum, you look at things differently. And you know that if you don't win that referendum at the end of the 18 months, you are out of office in 2 years. It will reposition your mind to do what the people want.
I get your point.
At least you get your priorities straight.
I get your point, and I'm still on Zoom with Professor Kwaku Asare. Prof, I need some views on this particular proposal, and we're actually moving the conversation in the direction of how do we fine-tune our current system to make it better, to improve it, to make it deliver the very goals of democracy that we've always talked about. And I'll be hearing you too. I also understand what I think we sure should have another guest on the Zoom. Yes. Yeah, okay, so I think I'm told Captain Retired George Infojo also joined it. He's a former member of Parliament for Whole Central, and of course he was also active during the PNDC days. So sure should be hearing him briefly. But Professor Kwaku Asare first.
Raymond, let me suggest 4 things.
Okay.
Number 1, I think much as we reject military coups, we must also be aware that there are subtle but equally destructive ways that civilians can attack a constitution.
Okay.
Stuff like media intimidation, preventive detention, disenfranchisement of citizens, public office holding exclusions, weakening or corrupting the institutional buffers of our democracy, such as the judiciary, the electoral commission, and so on. These are all subtle attacks on the constitution, and they are as destructive as military coups.
Forgive me, I picked up a word. Forgive me, I picked up a word, preventive detention. That's almost like an Nkrumah policy, right? The PDAs were during our very first republic, isn't it?
Yes, but it's still around. Second, I would want to see political party reforms, because the political parties are the engines that we put in place to carry our democracy along. But my view is that the political parties have assumed a character that is actually anti-progressive. We need several reforms. 1, in the way the political parties are financed. 2, in the way the political parties choose their candidates, internal democracy. 3, the political parties are not basically ideological anymore. People join because they want to put money in their pocket, because they want positions, because they want funds. 3, I would restrict the government's ability to choose winners and losers of our society. The government comes in and it has the possibility to make people millionaires, but also to make billionaires as poor as they can be. That's bad. That should not be the role of the government. The government should just provide the enabling environment and then allow people's creativity to drive the economy. We have government making too many appointments. We have government awarding too many contracts, and that is not very healthy for democracy. And number 4, I would ask that our constitutional buffers step up and do their job. What do I mean by that? Well, some of our constitutional buffers are Parliament, the judiciary, the public service. These are put in place to act as brakes on the power of the executive. The judiciary must be independent. I'm afraid they are not, in my opinion, stepping up to the plate. Parliament must not be a rubber stamp. I'm afraid they are not stepping up to the plate. The media must be vibrant, must be vigorous, must do investigative journalism. I'm afraid our media is too focused on entertainment. The public service must be neutral. I'm afraid we have politicized our public service. These are 4 quick things that we need to focus on. And if we do these things, that's how we are moving democracy forward. If we don't do these things, then it would appear as if we have replaced the soldiers, and we are just happy to allow the civilians to do whatever it is that they want to do, that the soldiers were doing. That must stop, and we need to initiate a conversation about how we take our democracy to the next level, and I believe the next level would have to embrace some of the reforms that I've enumerated.
Very interesting proposals there. I'm sure I can bounce it around a little bit, because there's a fifth one that's also suggested by Sergeant Aloga Katapori about the period you stay in office and the possibility of a midterm election. All of these on the table. I'll be coming to you briefly in studio here, but I've kept on the Zoom for quite a while now. Captain Infojo, I need some brief thoughts of yours on these proposals that have been raised, on making sure that we evolve a system that is robust a system that ensures development for all, which of these do you think should be promoted immediately?
Well, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for bringing me to join this August team. I think we have come a long way. 30 years now in a democracy, we must be able to find our feet and know the road we are traveling. I think we have the judiciary, we have the executive, we have executive, we have judiciary, we have our own parliament, that's legislative, and then the fourth estate, that is the press. I believe all these people team up and can work together effectively. Ghana will be moving somewhere. We won't need anybody to come and make a coup. You see, I have been a soldier. I've been a chief executive. I've been a member of parliament. And I know how all these three groups of people think. I've been in the executive, I've been in the legislature, and I've also been in the military. And I think they all respect each other. And I believe when that is carried through, you see, they are not brought together. They work on their own. But I think that what we should be doing in these 30 years is to educate them and bring them together so that nobody passes the other way to come and suggest that a coup would be better than all that is going on. Because we are not understanding each other. We are just doing things our own way. And also, I believe the press is not also being allowed to operate the way it should operate. Because for the press, you should allow them, to air their views and let you know and put you on the right road, correct you. But if you clamp down on the press, then you are trying to, shoot yourself in the foot. So I believe that we have to, in 30 years, we have to bring all these things. Because I remember Rollins saying that my coup shall end all coups in Ghana. Yeah. So if we've been able to come this far, then I don't see why we cannot, carry on. We need to carry on. We need to understand each other. Government must understand, the government party should understand the opposition, so that they work together. Parliament should be more harmonious than it is now. I mean, we see the military walking into parliament. What kind of system are we running? That thing frightened me that day, because we say we do not want coups, so why do we entertain people coming in? And up to now, we have found a solution to what happened. We don't even know why it happened. So I think that we ought to be very careful not to invite anybody, to bring bad ideas into our system. We've come very far.
There's, however, because I've been keeping you on for some time, there's, however, a question, though. This point that was made is a proposal. Perhaps I called it the fifth one, though. The proposal about having midterm elections to hold government more accountable after a referendum of a sort which may reject what government is doing after 18 months or somewhere midterm of the 4-year period. Do you think it's a good idea, Captain Fojo?
My brother, I don't think I buy it.
Okay.
He may have his reasons. He tries to explain, but by 18 months, the government hasn't even found its feet. They have not even placed people in their places. Ministers have not been formed up, and so on. So, and then the directors of organizations and so on have not been put in place. So if in 18 months you call for a referendum, you are calling for something else. I think let's allow the system to run out of peace. I remember President Kufuor, tried to suggest that it should be a little more than 4 years. So I don't see why we should bring it down to 18 months, not even 2 years, 18 months. So, Sergeant Akantapore, it's been a long time. Anyway, I'm not criticizing you. I'm only saying that I don't think I buy the idea that people should be tested after 18 months.
So for the avoidance of doubt, you at a point in time the media liaison officer for the PNDC, if I do recall right. Well, I'm not sure we still have Captain George Fojo there, but he is not so much into... Let me come in studio.
You're not clear.
Oh, well, I'm sure I can hear. Can you hear me now, sir?
Hello?
Yes.
The lights are gone off in my area.
Oh, you don't have power. Well, forgive me. I sure we should be able to get you in a very comfortable mode to join this conversation. Now, because of these proposals on the table, and that's where we are moving the conversation to now, which one do you think is worth considering? In fact, for Professor Kwaku Asare, there are currently indicators that are necessarily going against the structures of the state and also not promoting democracy like it ought to be done. But to him, the best way is to make sure that we remove all of these hindrances and blockades so that I can have a free flow of a democracy that's working for the people. You agree?
I agree to some extent. My fear is that we have turned democracy into an academic exercise. That when people in Ghana talk of democracy, they are talking of civil society organizations, university lecturers, and so on and so forth. How do we involve the masses of our people in this our democracy?
Are they not already involved?
They
are the ones participating in radio conversations. They are the ones watching discussions like this. Yes. They are the ones who do the communication. Sometimes for political parties, it's not active involvement for our people.
What I want is more active involvement.
We have almost 70% or around that particular number of our population on the voters register voting in an election. Oh, yeah. Is that not enough involvement?
Ghanaians are very active. Mm-hmm. And if you call them to vote, they will vote. Mm-hmm. But beyond the voting, the reason why we are having discussions about whether there's a need for violent change of government and so on is because some of them feel disenfranchised.
I see.
They are not given the opportunity in between elections. Basically, how do you encourage people to, in between elections, to also feel that they are part of the electoral process or part of the democratic process? And that's what I'm calling for, a way in which the government can support the mass movement to mobilize these groups so that they can continue to engage government in between elections. When Akataporo talks about 18 months, it's because once you finish voting, the avenue for involvement is almost shortened. And I don't see that happening. And I think that we need a better way of ensuring that this happens. And one of the things we can also do that has not come up is a review of our Constitution. The fourth Republican Constitution has done its best. So we have used it so well so far. But I think that we need to review that Constitution in the light of what has gone on to see which areas of it we can improve, which areas we can drop, to make it more efficient and more attractive to the masses of our people.
I'll come to you for concluding remarks on specifically what we should do to our Constitution. Because, of course, we've gone through this motion before. Under Mills, we carried out an activity like that. It went through a review or implementation committee, which was carried on into John Mahama period. The status of it is quite unclear as we speak, but that's something that we should be looking at now. There's, however, a point, though. I didn't hear your comment on this point about an election midterm.
No, I think I agree with the other speakers. The midterm election is too brief. Mm-hmm. Part of the problems that we accuse the PNDC of is that Liman was not given an opportunity to run his full term.
Okay.
18 months, I think, because once the government is brought into power, the first few months are used for bureaucratic purposes.
Okay.
Setting up government institutions, appointing officers, and so on and so forth. I think 18 months is too short. I think what we need, in addition, is a process of recall of our MPs.
Okay.
We need a process of recall.
Really?
The reason why the reason why the 18 months is important is because when these MPs are elected, some of them take their work seriously, some don't. And some citizens feel that they are not having enough from their MPs. Do we have a process of recall? Do we have a position that says, look, if a constituency feels that its MPs are not doing well or its MP is not doing what he or she is supposed to do, they can recall the person at some point. That I think we can reserve for MPs. But for the highest office of government, I think 18 months is too short.
I'll come back to that, but let me go to the Zoom and bring in Sergeant Akatapori. There's, however, a question that's been brought to my attention. Just last week, I was in a conversation with a member of the Liman Parliament, and we're discussing the current parliament vis-a-vis that parliament and the lessons we can learn from that. He rejected the claim that it was because of the rejection of the budget, that's why there was an intervention. Since you were there, probably seeing that, can you tell us a bit more about why the Liman government was removed from office? Was it directly linked to the inability of that government to get its budget through the parliament?
if it was in somebody's head, that's fine. But
sorry, I think you need to take a step back and because I didn't hear you properly. James is struggling to get you on.
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I think you are better now.
Okay. Yeah, basically what I'm saying is that it is not true that, look, the coup started by the end of 1979. Liman came into power September 1979. By the end December, Rawlings had started looking for me. So it's not true. Look, the coup happened and then reasons were sought. That's why I've apologized to the Liman administration about my involvement in the coup. So there were just excuses, basically. So it's not true. There wasn't any, and you see, we accused Liman of the things that we accused Achampon of. So there was a confusion there. It wasn't Achampon that were overthrown in 1981, but it looks as if we were given the very reasons that for which the Achampon and the Akufo regime were overthrown against Liman. So it's not true. They are just excuses.
Okay, but I need you to wrap up for me because I'm actually going to go around in this conversation. Okay. If you're asked to tell us, beyond your call for a midterm election of a sort, we are asked to tell us the best way to strengthen our democracy that will show the results that we want to see on the ground. What exactly do you think ought to be changed, mindful of your experience right from 79? Okay, so
I've got another idea, actually. But I agree with what Zaya said about the constitution. It needs to be looked at because it is one of the reasons why we have these problems. And my call for the 18-month referendum is also an indication that I'm not happy with the constitution. But another idea is about the MPs. The MPs, for me, all their salaries and so on should be paid through their constituencies. You see, so whatever money that the government has to pay the MPs should go to their constituencies, and their constituencies will decide how much they want to pay their MP. You see, it shouldn't be from the government to set a salary for the MPs. They can set a salary, but the actual payment of it should go through the constituencies. That way, those who are called honorables are the ordinary voters in the constituencies and not the single MP who comes into power and knows that he's going to be there for 4 years. All that he has to do is to satisfy the government in power or his party, and then he's okay for 4 years. And that is why I'm really still eager on this 18-month referendum. But for the MPs, they have to be controlled by the constituencies. And if one constituency decides that they'll pay their MP 1,000 Ghana, so be it. If another constituency decides that they'll pay their MP 500,000 Ghana or whatever it is, so be it.
But are those disparities acceptable? I mean, generally, in terms of pay structures?
The point is that if our constituency has not got enough money, and we need the money to sort out the schools, why should we pay for a V8? We would rather pay for the schools and let our MP ride in a pickup. What is wrong with that? So it is okay for that MP to be paid less than another place that has got more money, another constituency that may have money, or maybe are prepared to contribute more money even for the MP. That is the way I see the constituency must be in control of the MPs. Basically, that's what I'm saying.
Now, I get your point. In those remarks, Professor Koko Asare, the question remains, somewhere in 2011, Dr. Kewa Amaku reviewed our democracy. And he asked that big question, whether our democracy was yielding the results that we wanted to see at the end of the day, ensuring the development of its people eventually. Going into the future, how do we tackle some of these without any reference to an unconstitutional removal of government?
I've suggested 4 areas.
Yes, of course.
Should be looked at. I also want to agree with Daniel that the overthrow of the Liman government had nothing to do with economic hardships. Rawlings had an agenda when he was handing over in September 1979. And he did not make his intention secret. Everybody in Ghana knew what he was thinking. And it was just that the Liman government allowed him too much latitude, and then he allowed the boys' company to execute that December 31st coup. And let me also perhaps remind people that December 31 coup was not popular. I mean, the said students supported that, but that was Phil Gardner and some of these boys who used to call themselves socialist boys, who were imposing their views on students, because students were not even on campus. We were on holidays. And as soon as we came back, we started resisting that 31st December push. In terms of reforms, I agree that we need to involve people. One way of doing that is local government reform. The way we do our local government is pretty bad, because we have the executive appointing district executives and even members of the district assemblies. That is wrong. Local government should be left local. The people in the localities should be allowed to appoint their own chief executives, and they should be allowed to appoint their own assembly. Let me also touch quickly on this question of constitutional review. I'm totally against that. The Constitution itself does not provide a process for reviewing it. And so if you go outside and invent a process to review it, but that's a subtle attack on the Constitution itself. People think that only military people overthrow Constitution. When the Constitution has not given the president any power to review the Constitution, and the president on his own assumes the power to review the Constitution, that is an attack on the Constitution. We don't have to wait at some point in time to review the Constitution. If there are any articles in the Constitution that we deem inimical to our interests, there is a laid down process for amending the Constitution. The Constitution should be amended as needed, not that we set some people together and to engage in an exercise to review the Constitution. I don't know what that means. And then I also agree that 18 months, 24 months is too short to recall parliamentarians or to recall the president. And that's one reason why the coup against Liman was also uncalled for, because obviously you are not going to evaluate his government within 18 months in any rational way.
I'm sure I can thank you so much for joining us, Professor Kwaku Asare, and I also can thank you so much for joining us, Sergeant Aloga Akatapori. Coming to conclude here in studio, I mean, this is a conversation that started from asking the question whether there's any imminent threat. But it looks like virtually everybody in this conversation thinks issues of coup d'etats are a thing of the past, completely unreachable in this particular period. Yeah. The final question I'm asking you is that when you sit back and reflect on the periods that we've had over the years, do you think Ghana can reach the destination of total development for its people?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think Ghanaians are willing to do that, and I think the conditions are ripe for us to get to a point where we can have total development for the people of this country. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. What we are saying is that we do not need a violent change of government to achieve that. Mm-hmm. We can achieve it within the current constitutional arrangement. The parliamentary system, the judiciary, and so on and so forth is possible. What we need to do is to look at certain aspects of our democracy, deal with those aspects that are not working for us, and make sure that they work.
I'm grateful to you, and I'm also grateful to you for joining us on today's edition of Upfront. Many thanks to you for watching.